Hidden in the heart of this desert lies a place that may hold one of World War II's last remaining secrets. In this remote part of the American Southwest, rumors have circulated for decades about a secret Nazi spy hideout, concealed in this landscape of rock and sand. As World War II raged, Nazi spies were said to be active across the globe, gathering intelligence and seeking footholds in enemy territory. But how far did their network reach? Were they here, in the American Southwest, preying upon top-secret military bases? A few months back, I learned of this local legend. At first, I dismissed it as it seemed too far-fetched and improbable. But the question kept nagging at me. Could this be the real thing? An actual German hideout on US soil? My curiosity haunted me, and I knew I needed to find the supposed hideout for myself and examine the shadowy clues and evidence surrounding it. To get to the trailhead, I drove for a day through a wild and bizarre landscape. Arriving after dark, I got as much sleep as possible.
Okay, let's see. Oh my goodness. Oh. That should do.
Did you get my bag packed? What is that? Can you imagine if I had to carry this here just to get proper nutrition? I spend a lot of days on the road and on the trail, so I'm grateful for AG1 and their sponsorship of this video. AG1 is a green superfood powder that contains 75 vitamins, minerals, and whole foods ingredients. This stuff packs a powerful punch to fill in nutritional gaps and help maintain your health, something that's very important to me. For about a decade, I've used numerous green superfood powders to supplement my diet. Once I started using AG1, I haven't gone back to the others. It's part of my daily routine, whether I'm traveling or at home. It's so simple. Just take a scoop and mix it with 8 to 12 ounces of cold water, shake it up, and you're good to go. It's even more convenient for me when I'm backpacking, because they now make these convenient mini packs. Forget the 10 pounds of fruits and veggies. Instead, I just grab a handful of these. Whether I'm in the desert, the mountains, or at home, I trust AG1 to help me maintain an active and healthy lifestyle. If your health is important to you, you might want to give it a shot. Use the link in my description or scan the QR code to subscribe and save $20 off your first subscription of AG1. Man, it's a beautiful morning. So this is definitely a different kind of thing we're going in search of today. So we've got to head somewhere up this canyon here. So I've got to give credit for this adventure to actually a couple that watches the channel. A number of months ago, they emailed me. I mean, immediately my interest was piqued, right? A German spy hideout in the Southwest. What more to the story do you need? But I wanted to look into the story a little bit myself. You know, was there any sort of substance and evidence around it? Sure enough, there is. So here I am. If these local legends are true, at least one German spy was hiding out not too far from here during the 1940s. I think I'm going to have some creek crossings here pretty quickly, so I kept my sandals on to start with. It's crazy what mud and some sun can do. Whew, that's cold. Quite an idyllic setting, isn't it? With the river and the lighting right now. Okay, I've got to gain some elevation. So here's the story as I understand it. On researching this, I came upon a couple variations of this local legend, but the one that seemed the most reliable comes from a book written by Southwestern guide Michael Kelsey. The story Kelsey tells goes something like this. In 1953, a local cowboy was out searching for a runaway horse. As night fell, he saw moonlight glinting off of something metallic. He went over to it and was immediately spooked by what he saw. It was a hideout of some kind, and it gave him a weird feeling. He went back to camp with the other cowboys and told them what he had found. They laughed at his story and didn't buy it, but the next day, they all went back to the site. What they saw in the daylight perplexed all of them, and eventually resulted in them contacting the authorities. Okay, where to next? So, when I think about the plausibility of this whole story, I think of a couple things. Is it possible there were German spies in this part of the country during World War II? Nazi spies in the US definitely happened. Just a quick search will turn up stories like this from the official FBI.gov website discussing German espionage activity here during the Second World War. The threat of spies infiltrating the United States was definitely a major fear during the war. The fear of spies was so great that it led to one of the sad chapters of American history, the Japanese-American internment camps of World War II. If you're not familiar with those, here's a brief synopsis. After the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, paranoia towards anyone with Japanese ancestry was high, even against those who had been United States citizens for decades. A law was passed in 1942, and the government rounded up some 100,000 Japanese Americans and sent them to relocation centers where they could be watched and ensure they weren't spying. Most of these people lost their homes, businesses, and personal belongings as they spent the rest of the war in these camps, about 3 to 4 years. A tragic irony is that even families with sons fighting in the U.S. military were incarcerated in these camps. So we know that the American government and public greatly feared espionage, and we know for sure there were German spies in country during the war, but would they be here? Once you get up high here and you can see further, it is really quite a stunning landscape. So another piece I'd been considering before coming here was if this was a spy, why would he choose right here? You'd want to be far enough away from some point of interest not to arouse too much suspicion, and yet you wouldn't want to be too far away because what's the whole point of spying on something if you're in the middle of nowhere? So following that line of thought, I was like, okay, well, I'm going to need to see what kind of military bases might have been in this area during World War II. So this turned up some interesting findings. It's not as simple as just figuring out where military bases are today, since there were numerous places used during the war and then shut down sometime after. The site I'm investigating today sits in the borderlands of Arizona, Utah, and Nevada. So I started searching to find out what bases had been in this vicinity in World War II. This could easily become a deep, dark research hole, and I admit I don't have days to devote to it. So my findings may be incomplete, but here's what I got. This is a good map of military bases in Utah during the war. Finding quality maps of Nevada and Arizona's bases during the war was harder. These give some idea, but are incomplete. For instance, Camp Navajo west of Flagstaff was founded during the war, but it's not on the map. If this was a base of operations for espionage activities, how far would a realistic striking distance be? We'll come back to that question. Oh man, there it is. Wow. Wow. That is bizarre. I guess let's start over here at this one. Huh. Big old metal crate. A little bit of glass still down there. Other than that, it's been picked clean. E969 maybe? 94. 964? I see there's an old, let's see, there's a cattle brand, I think. Maybe the guys who found it. A couple bullet holes for good measure. Here's the other side. Yeah, I noticed. All right, so I mean, there's a bunch of little holes. There's a bunch of like windows in this thing, or like, what's this back here? It's almost like you expect some sort of a pipe to come out of that. I'm not sure why a storage bin would have so many of those. Was this thing storing some kind of radio or communication device? This other side is more beat up, but once again, it's got a window up there. Huh. There's another much more beat up storage crate. I'd imagine this crate was just like the other one, except time has not been so kind to it. This one's different because there's a bunch of old, I don't know, maybe fuel can, kerosene, gas, something like that. A bunch of old cans here. Looks like maybe an old glass bottle of 7-Up, perhaps? Old 7-Up bottle? I don't know. There's some more broken glass around, but nothing else I'd really call an artifact. There's more to these than meets the eye. That's because a lot of what the cowboys stumbled upon in 1953 is no longer here. Let's pick that story up where we left off. If you remember, the first cowboy who spotted it did so because of moonlight glinting off of something metallic. He walked up to it, which I assume was this first metal crate, looked in, and found what seemed to be a bed in it, with uniforms and other things laying around. He was creeped out, so didn't stick around to investigate. But remember, they came back in daylight the next day. That's when they realized there was a lot more here. Strange place, huh? Let's go check this thing out. Wow. Don't know what that would have been used for. Clearly fires were in here. There doesn't seem to be much of a ventilation system, and it had to be smoky in here. Some pack rat nest now here in the back. Huh. Look at this over here, some kind of wires coming in. Right through the front wall there. Let's see, does this front door still work? Nope. Let's see if we can find those wire ends. Is this them? Yeah. Huh. Given the green on here, it looks like some kind of copper wire. Looks like some kind of concrete he used here. Once again, the local legend, as told in this book and this old newspaper article, sheds light on what we're seeing. In the daylight of 1953, the cowboys returned. It was immediately apparent there wasn't just one metal crate here, but two, along with a cave that had been walled up. On the ground outside was a generator attached to a small windmill. In one metal box there was a bed, a military uniform of some kind, a .22 caliber rifle, a wood-burning stove, and clothing. The other box contained a significant cache of food. The windmill and generator were hooked up to wiring that ran into the cave. Inside the cave were numerous batteries, fuel containers, and water jugs. Strange, indeed. But how do we get from a hermit's hideout to a Nazi spy base? Well, one, there was the alleged military uniform. Two, cans of food found supposedly had manufacture dates during World War II. Three, perhaps more convincing, was that the serial numbers on everything, whether it was the generator, the rifle, the batteries, whatever, every number had been purposefully scratched off. And lastly, once the story got out and the locals learned about this hideout, a couple local ranchers began retelling stories of an odd man they would occasionally see here during the early 1940s, smack dab in the middle of the war. This man apparently didn't talk much, but when he did give a greeting or something in passing, he spoke with a very thick German accent. The possibility of nefarious activities was great enough that the cowboys eventually reported their find to the local police. The local sheriff is said to have compiled a report and sent it to the FBI. After that, the story becomes murky. While flying the drone, I saw an interesting looking cave just a short distance back, so let's go take a look at that. Interesting, I came up on top to go to that cave. Looks like here's some ventilation. Okay, that makes sense, because I was like, that would be an absolute nightmare. Some old piping down there. It looks like that's all choked full of stuff nowadays. I assume this would have been the chimney for a wood-burning stove inside. There it is. I don't know that there's anything in it, but I figured it was worth looking at. No, nada. If there was indeed an FBI report made about this site, then there's a file on it somewhere. What, if anything, the FBI concluded, I couldn't tell you. One version of the story says the FBI followed up with the local police and told them this place was likely used by a spy in World War II. Personally, I find it hard to believe the FBI would just flippantly throw around information like that. Something everyone agrees upon is that transporting all of this stuff up here was a feat in of itself for whoever did it. The locals speculated for decades about how it was done. If you want my opinion on all of this, here it is. I believe the two most compelling pieces of evidence to consider are the removal of serial numbers on everything and the hideout's proximity to World War II era military bases. Regarding the numbers, let's read what this newspaper article says about it. All identifying marks had been eliminated as much as possible. In addition, all numbers, wherever found, had been eradicated, even where they could not possibly be considered as identification. The mysterious hermit seemed to have a phobia against numbers. He had a thermometer, but the hate of numbers led him to scratch off all the figures. When I hear that, particularly about the thermometer, I think of a strange, secluded guy with a clinical psychological phobia against numbers, not necessarily a savvy international operative. Now, how about this site's proximity to military bases? Would it make sense for a spy to be located here? The question we'd have to ask is, what's a reasonable striking distance? According to my research, the closest military base would have been Camp Navajo, a solid 180 miles away. The bases over near Las Vegas are the next closest, and those would be about 250 miles away. Seems pretty far to me. It appears there were no military bases in southern Utah during the war. Now, of course, a foreign country could be interested in more than a military base, say a large manufacturing plant or something. But I find it unlikely there was any large-scale industry going on here. So the question remains: a Nazi spy or some oddball German immigrant? I don't know. What do you guys think?